So it is October, it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I just wanted to share a little story about how I stayed sober through grief and loss. My mother actually passed away from cancer about 3 years ago. She had this little bump on the back of her neck that had been bothering her, and a friend took her to the emergency room, and I was informed that she had cancer. She was sad, but she was kind of in good spirits, and she thought, there's a lot of new things they can do nowadays. We just were like ending the day with, you know what, we'll just gather some more information, we'll make a plan, and we'll move on from there. Well, by the time I got home, it was about 10 o'clock at night, and I get a phone call, and it's the doctor. And the doctor had told me that, yes, they did the cervical scan, that it was cancer, but that they had also done a thoracic and abdominal scan, and it came back that she was completely riddled with cancer. It was in her bones, it was in her organs. She had free-floating tumors in her body. She was stage 4. It was terminal. As you can imagine, the shock I felt when I got the news, I was holding the phone, I just sank to the floor. And the lady was like, "Do you want me to tell her?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. Let her have this one night and we'll deal with it in the morning." So the next day I go to the hospital, and I'm really sad. I'm holding this information, knowing I have to tell my mom that she's stage 4, it's terminal, and we're waiting for the doctors, and it's, we're kind of sitting there for a while, and she's like, maybe there's stuff they can do now, and I hear there's good treatments. Then she looks at me, she said, "Did the doctor call you last night with the results of the other scans?" And I was like, "Yeah, they called me." And she was like, "Well, what did they say?" And I was like, "Well, it's not good." She was like, "Oh," she's like, "It's bad." And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Is it stage 4? And I said, "Yes." Then she kind of just took a long breath, and she goes, "Well, I just hope it goes quickly." And it did. From that date to when she passed away, it was like 22 days. During that time, I'm a woman in long-term sobriety. I have a lot of support around me. I have really good practices, like good self-care practice, prayer, journal, meditation. I mostly rely on people. Like I was just telling somebody the other day, my bench is deep. I have a lot of people, my support network. I was calling people, sharing what was going on. It was important to share your feelings and talk out loud. So I was doing all that stuff. Of all the people, I have a sister, there are other people, my aunt came up from Mexico City where she lives to come be with us. And it was so interesting because when I was growing up, I was the problem, right? I was the problem. But now, 30 years later, after being sober a long time, I'm the one that they all turn to, which, made me feel really good. But it was just like, wow, none of this would have happened had I not been sober. The prayer, meditation, journaling, my support network, support meetings, all that stuff, I would not be sitting in that position. Now I try to help people who are trying to get sober, right? It was a few years ago. At the time, I had just gotten a certification for hypnosis, so I used that in my practice too. Towards the end, my mother was under a lot of medication. I was having to manage like liquid morphine and lorazepam and some other things that I don't really remember now because it was a while ago. I remember, wow, here I am, a former, drug addict. I was the one that they trusted, and I had enough sobriety. Like I had healed enough where I could handle that. And it was just really interesting for me to just be in that, have that realization that I'm the one that they trusted now. Like all the work that I've done over the years put me in a position to where they trusted me, and I could be there for my mom, the person that I love so much in this world, that I could be there for her in, her darkest hours. I was up with her pretty much all night, every night, like every few hours, giving her medication and things like that. It was just such a difficult time. But I was able to show up for my mom. And towards the end, when she was on so much morphine that she really wasn't awake anymore and hadn't been for a while, and her breathing was labored, and it was getting close to the end, but we could tell she wasn't able to let go. And my aunt kept asking me, she's like, "Oh, maybe you could do hypnosis with your mom and help her to let go." And I was like, yeah, I should. And finally one day she was like, "How about now?" Let me just set the scene for you. It was a beautiful morning. And my mom was, laying in bed. It was like she was asleep, and the sun was shining on her face, and outside her bedroom window was this beautiful lake, and it was like the smoke was on the water and the geese were on the water. And it was just a beautiful morning. And I put on this beautiful music and I started to just talk to her from my heart, telling her things like, you know, I was separating her body and her spirit. So I was saying, your body is getting lighter and lighter. Your body is getting heavier and heavier. And everybody here is safe and you can relax and you can let go. Down, her breathing is slowing. And I just kept talking to her in that way. At one point I opened my eyes and I realized, oh my God, this is working. You know, I could see a visible change in her. And I just closed my eyes and I kept talking to her. And at one point I heard the birds lift off the water and I opened my eyes and my mom was gone. And it was such a precious moment that in the end, it was just me and her, that she had trusted me to guide her out. And I am so grateful that I was able to be sober. I'm so grateful that I was the one that was with her during that time. And it's only because I was sober. And there are many gifts in sobriety that you would never expect. Like this was one of those things. I never expected to be, I used to be the problem child. I never expected to be the one that she could count on in her last needs. It's such a painful experience. I miss her terribly. It took me like 1.5 years to feel like myself again. But I was able to grieve through that time because I had lots of support. I had lots of self-care practices. I did a lot of journaling, but a lot of talking. And I had surrounded myself with a lot of loving people who were able to just hold space for me while I processed my feelings. So I'm still sober. I'm 30 years sober now. This happened about 3 years ago. I am just so grateful to the people who taught me all these emotion management skills to get me through stressful times, because really stress is like the #1 trigger for people to relapse and start drinking again. But you know, I survived. I feel stronger than ever, and I'm starting to feel like myself again. Grief takes a long time, and it's a difficult process, but it ends. Like I will never be the same again, but I'm in a good place now. And for that, I'm grateful. And I think it's really important to learn how to manage stress, because really, like I said, stress is one of the biggest triggers for relapse. So I have another video about how to handle cravings and triggers. So if you want to check that out, I hope it helps. And thanks so much for listening to my story.